Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Now for Monday, the 20th of February, 2017. Let's take a look at what's happening in the world of watching the upcoming hurricane season and monitoring the larger puzzle pieces that we try to put together to give us as clear a picture as possible, anyway, as to what might happen. And one of those clues is the Southern Oscillation Index, or SOI, and how that relates to the state of what we call the ENSO, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and then progressively moving on, how that would affect the Atlantic hurricane season specifically, and any implications that that might have on the Pacific hurricane season and global weather patterns as a whole. So everything's interconnected, and I won't say it all starts with the SOI, but for me, this is a good litmus test, a good way to judge what's going on with the pressure fields in the atmosphere. And generally speaking, as I have said, I've talked about it many times, when you have a consistently and fairly strong negative SOI, especially in the long term, like the 90 days, for example, then you typically have conditions that are more favorable for El Nino to develop. And when the opposite is true, we have strongly positive SOI readings, then it's more of a La Nina pattern. So where are we right now? Well, the daily contributor is -9. We have had a string of negative 40s and 50s, and that has dragged down the 30-day to negative -2, -2, and that in turn has dragged the average for the 90-day, which was around 2, positive 2, to just a little bit above 1 here at 0.62. So the bottom line here, the overall trend in the SOI is down. And I believe that we will probably end January here with its contributor to the monthlies in the negative. It's not strongly negative yet, but it is starting to lean more towards the El Nino-ish look, where you get more westerly winds, the pressure patterns change, and you start to get some downwelling where the water, the surface water, is literally pushed down. Upwelling is where the water is forced upward. Upwelling occurs a lot during hurricanes when they churn up the water and during other powerful ocean storms. Whereas downwelling can take that warm water in the western Pacific and sort of force it downward, and then it propagates or moves eastward in the subsurface. It's all very complicated, but we can watch it. And that's what's fascinating to me, is we can monitor this with all sorts of tools. So what does this mean for the anomalies map, the departures from normal? Well, this updated today as well, and we still have a little bit of a cold anomaly out in the central Pacific, but that's starting to really erode. Warm or positive anomalies beginning to spread westward from the coast of South America along the equatorial region. But overall, the Pacific as a whole, what we call the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, kind of looking at the North Pacific as a bigger picture, the PDO is down some, which, again, it's all interconnected and very complicated, seemingly. But the Pacific is kind of headed more towards a neutral state, is what I'm getting at here. All of these index numbers, or indices, if we call them that, plural, are gradually moving closer to zero. We're never going to sit right at zero where everything is in perfect balance, but we're not headed towards a super El Nino like we had in 2015 into 16. More of a warm neutral to very weak El Nino conditions, maybe out across the central Pacific, what we call the Modoki El Nino. And again, these are things that I can explain more in detail later if they come to pass. But right now the stage is being set for a warmer Pacific than we had last year, perhaps, but not that warm. And other factors, we got to look at what the Pacific temperatures are in this area and how much hurricane activity we expect in the area in the southeast Pacific, because that, if you have a lot of upward motion here, then you're going to have a lot of downward motion over here generally. And that's what we saw for a good deal of last year until late September, really late August through September and October, of course, culminating with Matthew, and then we had Otto in November, which was upgraded to a Cat 3 down here in Central America. So a lot of different things to watch, and there's no easy way to figure it all out. And on the other side of the continent here, the pair of continents, North and South America, the Atlantic Ocean, running at or just slightly above normal in a few places. No major warm areas in the Atlantic except here in the Northwest Atlantic, which is really amazing. The Gulf of Mexico, for the most part, with the exception of this little crescent area of cold, the Gulf of Mexico running quite a bit above the long-term average. And there's a lot of speculation about that, once again, not only for the hurricane season, but for tornado season, because you get these low-pressure areas coming out of the Rockies and dropping into the Great Plains with southerly winds ahead of those low-pressure areas. And where does that wind originate from? But the very warm Gulf of Mexico. So it's going to be an interesting spring. Flood potential, severe weather potential, all of that lining up before we even get to June 1st with hurricane season. So as I mentioned, the subsurface is an area to watch. And right now we have these different chunks of things going on. Okay, we got a small little chunk of cold anomaly still holding on here, kind of a larger blob in the Central Pacific surrounded by a larger area of neutral, and then a few islands or chunks here of positive anomalies. One growing over here in the Western Pacific, a large one way down in the subsurface below 150 meters deep. And so there's really no clear-cut idea as to where we're going. It's in a confused state, trying to balance more towards neutral overall, and I don't see anything in here that tells me that we're going to have a raging El Nino like 2015, nor do we look like we're going to have a La Nina pattern. And it's those neutral years that we tend to get some landfalls in the U.S. that are not very pleasant. Again, when we get closer to the season, and I think we have a better handle on what the state of the ENSO is, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, I can go back and show you, hey, years where we had a profile like this resulted in hurricane seasons like that. Kind of an analog way of looking at it, but it's not time yet because it's still just February. All right, so looking at the different predictions, this comes from Columbia University and their collaboration with the International Research Institute and the Climate Prediction Center. And we can look at this in bar graph form, slowly losing the neutral. Hurricane season starts in here, May, June, July, and neutral conditions would more than likely prevail by June, July, and August. The odds of El Nino or neutral are about equal, so this is really our neutral period. And then by the time we get to July, August, September, and August, September, October, and this area through here, the peak of the hurricane season in the Atlantic, still only a little bit more than 50% odds of there being an El Nino. It's still fairly early, but we are moving these 3 month, this time period, this 3 month time period, closer to the present, okay, because this will gradually move to the left. We will add additional 3 months, etc. on the right. And as you see, probability of La Nina starts to go up to near 20% by the time we get to next winter, or late fall anyway. So, these are things that we can watch. No big changes from week to week and from month to month yet. Now, the plots here of the different models, and there are a bunch of them, kind of take away and really just look at these three. The dynamical average, fairly bullish here from the dynamical models, the more advanced, run them on supercomputers type models. You got the Euro with its 51 ensemble members, the climate forecast system. I don't remember how many it has off the top of my head, but these dynamical models are supposed to be more sophisticated. That's one way to look at it, and that's showing close to El Nino conditions, which will be about right in here roughly. But the Climate Prediction Center consensus is like this and takes us back just below the neutral category. So there's a little bit of a divergence in the overall thought here from the models, from just shy of El Nino to keeping it, warm to slightly cool neutral. But again, we don't see any major spikes upward in the overall models, the consensus, and the statistical and dynamical averages. If all of them were headed in that direction, I would be worried on a lot of levels. We saw what happened when we had that major El Nino to global temperatures, and yeah, that's a big deal. I've talked about it before, that the El Nino is like turning up the Earth's thermostat. So we don't need that. It's been very warm. I mean, here it is, February 20th. I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, and it's 70 degrees outside. It's going to be almost 80 by the end of the week. Some weird things are happening with the weather. Is it man-made? I have no clue for sure, but I do know when you warm the Pacific like we did in 2015, that is, like I said, turning on the thermostat, and it's the big house where we all live, and we've all had to deal with it. So I would just assume not have another El Nino of any intensity for a while. Let things balance out. All right, so let's move along now to the Gulf Coast temperatures. Spring break coming up next month into April. Shelf waters still in the blues and purples, so that's chilly. But the 26 degrees Celsius, which is right here, starting to creep more into the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so watch as I go to, this is back, when was this? 5th of February, so this is 15 days ago. Watch what happens when I advance just a little bit here to the 20th. You can see the lines that I had earlier. This is what it was on the 5th. Here we are on the 20th. Not a giant change, but there is the 26 Celsius line, or isotherm. We're also developing some down here in the Bay of Campeche. See, we go back to the 5th, there was nothing. And now we're starting to develop that more. So gradually, let's put it this way. The cooling period for the Gulf is over. It's still winter, but the sun angle is getting higher in the sky, and we're going from gradually warming to steadily warming, and all of this will begin to fill in. Wait till I show you this a month from today. The Western Atlantic still continues to absolutely amaze me. Water temperatures up in this region running well above the long-term average. Out here, 25 degrees Celsius, which is 77, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. A little island of it right here just off of Cape Hatteras at 36 degrees north latitude in February. That's amazing. And we have seen the result of this warmer than normal water. Now that's 7 degrees Celsius. And you say, Mark, that's not very warm. Well, that's true. But the water temperatures up here are warmer by several degrees Fahrenheit than they should be. And look what happened. We had several, 3 in a row, storms come off and move across this region, and all 3 of them underwent bombing conditions over the northwest Atlantic, dropping 24 millibars or more in a 24-hour period, I believe it is, or something like that. They call it bombogenesis. I went up there for the second one. The Weather Channel names the storms, so just as a reference, they called that one Orson, and that's a story for another day, whether or not you agree with that. But when you got 3 of them in a row, maybe that's not a bad idea to give them a name, but I just wish it was a concerted effort with the Weather Service. But again, story for another day, not my place. But I did go up there for that last week. That's why you didn't hear from me, really. Very busy with that. Got some really cool footage I'll post. And in fact, I did post it on YouTube from that area. The low pressure area bombed out over here, and those north and northwest winds came around into Cape Cod Bay and drove a storm surge into that region of a couple of feet. And it was pretty amazing to see, no doubt about it. Cape Cod, a beautiful place. So interesting stuff. All right, I'm not going to go into lower 48 weather today. There's just a heck of a lot going on out in California. And if you don't already know about it, then you got bigger problems, because that's a huge story. Really no big severe weather risks east of the Rockies right now. We will get into severe weather season soon enough, and I'll talk about it when I see something very large scale and problematic coming up. But for the most part, if you're watching this video, you're pretty tuned into the weather as it is. So I want to talk about, finally, after November, December, January, and into February here, a little over 100 and something days, I got the documentary finished. And it's a 2-part series. The first part goes from 09 to 15, kind of taking you where we've come from since the beginning of these remote cameras that we came up with in 2005. That's a while back now, coming up on 12 years ago, through 2015. And then part 2 is 2016 altogether, which really features Hermine and, of course, Matthew. So I'm going to do like any good movie that opens, and I'm proud of it. I think it's pretty good, especially considering I don't have formal training in video production. I'm not a movie director, and I put everything together on a Sony Vaio, and it's pretty good. I think you'll like it. I do my own music, and great video, especially as you see how things progressed. So, when will it be available? That's the big question, right? Friday. Like movies open on Friday, this will open on Friday. So Friday in the afternoon, so noon Eastern time, the first part will go live on YouTube for you to watch. And it's about an hour and a half. Yeah, hour and 24 minutes. And it goes from 2009 through 2015. And it'll really give you a look at where we have come from. Like I said, it's just, I think you're going to really find it fascinating. And then the following Friday, I will put 2016 online, part 2, and that will, this is really probably my masterpiece. Very good editing, lots of use of photographs and the what we call the Ken Burns effect, where you take a photograph and you pan or zoom across it to help put it into motion and to tell a story. Original music that I created using synthesizers, and I was a music major before I went into geography. It's just a little tip, inside information trivia for you. And so I know how to play and compose, and I did my own music. And 2016, I watched it last night on my iPad, just kind of making sure everything's where it should be. And wow, I mean, even I tried to be objective. I was like, wow, this is really good. It's captivating, and is it good enough for television? It's not that type of a documentary. It's not exciting, and there's no drama and conflict between people like you see on these reality shows. It's a documentary. It's exactly the facts. It's what we did from 2009 through 2016. And I say we, I may be the voice and the face of everything, but there are a lot of people that help to make this happen. So I'm excited. Hopefully you are too. I've had people asking about it, and it's finally done. So we're going to do it in proper form, make you wait a little bit longer. Friday, noon Eastern time. If you're subscribing on YouTube, you'll get a notification. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do so, and you'll be notified when it's ready, and as well as other videos. All right? So there you have it. Have a great rest of your Monday. Thanks as always for tuning in. I do appreciate it very much. It's awesome to be able to convey my knowledge to you and my passion for this to you as well. And you're going to see that in this documentary. It'll really come through. So have a great rest of your week ahead. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Don't forget to check back on Friday, because the first part will be posted then. All right? And then I will talk to you again next Monday.